All right, you guys, you got to talk. That's all I got to say is you got to talk. All right, so I think we'll go ahead and read this one. Oh, sorry. Oh, wrong one. I forgot it was on the preview. So I think we kind of talked about this last week. James 4, 11 and 12. Brothers and sisters, do not slander one another. Anyone who speaks against a brother or sister or judges them speaks against the law and judges it. When you judge the law, you are not keeping it, but sitting in judgment on it. There is only one lawgiver and judge, the one who is able to save and destroy. But you, who are you to judge your neighbor? So I think we kind of talked about it last week. Any other thoughts or comments? Maybe that you meditated on it through the week? Okay, good. Because we're going to go on to James 13 through 15. Now, interesting fact about this. You notice he doesn't have any underlines? I thought about tonight that one thing we talked about, say, why did he underline this? Because he didn't give me any notes. So, in this passage, in this section of the verse, of the chapter, there's absolutely no commentaries on it. I have a NIV study Bible, and they have commentaries like on all the verses and stuff. And there's it's just blank. There's nothing there. It's like they ignored this whole thing. But there's a ton of stuff in here. So, now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow, we will go to this or that city, spend a year here, carry on business, and make money. Why? You do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. So it's talking about making plans, and making plans and not knowing if they're going to follow through or not. How can you say you're going to go to the city and you're going to do this, you're going to do that, and then we're going to leave, and when we don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow. I remember Chelsea was in, I don't know, grade school probably, and we had planned to do something over the weekend. And she was really excited about it, and she would tell her friends or a teacher or whatever. And then something would come up, and we wouldn't be able to do it. And she would be, okay, and so this was her response. She goes, I go, what's wrong? I know you're disappointed. She goes, I lied to all of those people. This is my Chelsea who cannot tell a lie. All right? She goes, I lied to all those people. I told them we were going to do this. And I was like, well, honey, it's not, you didn't know. You weren't lying. But we get so caught up in making our plans. Okay, so here's my question with this. It's talking about plans, and we don't even know what tomorrow is going to bring. So, are we supposed to make plans? So how does that work into the whole thing, living day by day? But yet we need to...
I feel like the first verse is, typical of our current kind of culture, saying hey, this is my goal, this is what I'm going to do, because I feel like to a certain extent, if you don't have goals, and you don't have a vision, and you don't have a plan, then you're also criticized for not having a vision, and a plan, and a goal, and doing all those things, and so, I feel like what they're saying, which is somebody who didn't grow up in the church, is hard. It's not my knee-jerk response. It's saying that we should first acknowledge the fact that it'll be whatever God wants us to do. And if it is God's will, then we will do this.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a culture.
Right. It seems like there was an era when I grew up. Pastor Calvin, he always talks about the things of way back when. Well, I remember this thing where it was everyone would say, Lord willing, we're going to preach on this next week, or Lord willing, we're going to go and we're going to do this. Do you guys ever remember that whole thing, Lord willing? And I thought about this. So does it make it okay if we say, tomorrow we're going to go to this city, spend a year there, carry on business, and make money, Lord willing? So does that make it all okay? Or, yeah.
I think the saying probably came from this, and it's kind of funny, but I think the point of the passage is you can have plans, which is fine, but if something happens or the Lord changes your direction or your path for that day, don't be so rigid that you can't just go with the flow and sometimes ignore your plans. Because I find most of us have a daily routine, especially if you have a full-time job. You have a daily routine, and sometimes that routine gets disrupted. And if your routine gets disrupted, it can put you in a funk. You can be in a bad mood all day because you've laid out your day.
Yeah.
But I find that the times that your plans get disrupted are often like hidden blessings or opportunities to witness or whatever. Sometimes the Lord will keep you from getting out the door on time, but then you find out there's an accident on the road on the Lord. So make plans, because you can't just live for the day. But at the same time, when things happen, just go with the flow, because the Lord may be protecting you or putting you somewhere for the right thing.
Yeah. How many of you are like super rigid as far as making your plans, and they have to go the way you've made them, or just like nobody's going to hit it now, are you?
See, I think that the example you're giving is the example that, like, I know for myself, like, I've practiced to be flexible in, but it's the big life things that jam me up. Like when life takes a left turn and you're like, that's not at all. Like, it's the big things. It's the job losses. It's the losing homes. It's the broken family. It's the that stuff that, like, it's so hard to be flexible or just go, and be thankful.
But a lot of times those are the exact things that God is in. I mean, I'm not saying God's not in that, but those are the things. God's in those things too. I think about seniors, and you have a senior. Does anybody else have a senior, high school senior or college senior? Okay, so I remember when my kids were seniors. Gosh, I don't want to use Chelsea as an example too much. She's one of those ones. She wants everything in place. She wants all of her ducks in a row, and if it doesn't, she's pretty flexible. But I always think about. I was in youth ministry, and the seniors they'd have everything laid out. Like, I'm going to this college, I'm going to get my degree in this, I'm going to work in this, and I'm going to work in that. I don't know if you listen to like your seniors and their plans and stuff, but do you just kind of go, okay?
That's my senior isn't like that, but my middle schooler is like that. He very one-track mind.
Yeah.
And we were, just trying to explain to him that going to a really expensive engineering school versus a middle-of-the-road engineering school does not guarantee you a better career.
Right.
It's all the other choices, the projects you take on, the reputation you get.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So, we have to, as parents, we've got to, you don't want to, this is the hard part as a parent. You don't want to squelch their dreams and and who they are, but you want them to realize that things may not always go exactly as planned. It's like Chelsea started out going for a teaching degree, and she just got tired of education, because it was like the longer she went, the more years they put on. And she's like, I want to go out and live life. I want to start doing something. And so she kind of jogged around, and she got her bachelor's degree in early education, and and that's what God is going to use her for, is in that. And so Nathaniel was the same way. He had a plan, and things didn't quite go, and he's searching, he's looking for what he wants to do, and he likes doing this, but he wants to do more, and so you just have to adjust with it.
I've always asked people the question, so what if that doesn't work out? What's going to happen? Yeah. When I consulted in businesses, I would always tell business owners, okay, have your vision, like, know where you want this business to go, but be prepared for the plan to change constantly while you're going towards that vision, because that's a 5-10 year goal.
Right.
You know, and that is the number one thing that jams people up the most is their, this is how I'm gonna get to that point.
Right. And in ministry, Mike and I have encountered this a lot. You know, in ministry, you know, they'll graduate from college and they know where they want to go, they know what they want to do. And sometimes, you know, God has a different plan than what we have, and it doesn't go that way. And, you know, it's something that you have to be aware of. And a lot of people would ask us, you know, where do you see yourself in 3 years? You go for a job application or interview, and sometimes, well, where do you see yourself in 3 years? And after we've been in ministry about, I don't know, it was 5 or 6 years, I'd be like, I want to be exactly where God wants me to be. And however that is, or wherever that is, I'm going to be happy. You know, because it's just, you don't know. Because you don't know the turns that God is going to take. I mean, and some people, they know exactly God told them this and this and this. And, you know, that's great. But sometimes he just wants us to trust him. Because he doesn't always tell us. And this is where that, where it says, you are like, what is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. And it was so funny when I was kind of studying this, but it's like, a mist is not solid. It's not, what was the other word? It's not certain, it's not solid. A mist, it appears and then it just kind of vanishes. And that's what our life is like. I looked up like how did he get this, that we are a mist, you know? And there's a couple places that they referred back to in Psalms and Isaiah, where it was like David was lamenting that he had just gone through a rough time and everything, and he's like, who am I? What am I? I'm just not important, you know. And a lot of times it was from calamities or a difficult time in their life that they cried out to God and said, I'm just a mist. What is my life? My life is, you know. But then, and here's where I'm kind of like, maybe you can shed some light on this. It's like he tells us, you know, in the New Testament, he tells us, well, in the Old and the New, we're chosen, we are children of God, we are like warriors, you know, but then we're a mist.
So if you look up the Greek of mist, though, it takes you to the root word, and it says to breathe unconsciously. It says the air, particularly the lower and denser air, as distinguished from the higher and rarer air. You know, like, so when you look at it in the Greek, it's actually like a rare.
Oh, a rare mist. We're a rare mist.
So that's
We're peculiar. I think I'm rare.
So, okay. What is the difference between a vision and a plan that James talks about in here? Okay, so is it Proverbs? Without a vision, the people perish. So he's clearly telling us we need to have a vision, but then here it says, you shouldn't make plans, you shouldn't make plans. I think Corey got it with the flexibility. But is there a difference between a vision and a plan?
For sure. So the vision is your end state, and you, well, not everybody, but a lot of people have had a vision, I've had visions. You don't exactly know how to get there. So in your mind, you try to set forth a plan of steps to reach that vision or that goal. But just because I laid out my plan to reach the end state doesn't mean it's the same plan God laid out for my end state. So.
That's good. That's good. All right. All right. 16 and 17. As it is, you boast in your arrogant schemes. All such boasting is evil. If anyone then knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is a sin for them. So like, I'm reading this. Where did that come from? Doesn't it seem like it just kind of out of the blue? And I've noticed that James is kind of like this when PK's talking and stuff and he's going through the verses. I'm like, where did that come from? How does that relate to that? Because I'm always like, analyzing and getting context and everything. So I'm like, so how does this scripture relate to the scripture above it or below it? And then it's really distracting being able to see the windows. But then it said that James is like the New Testament Proverbs. So you know, like in Proverbs, it has these short little quips, these short little verses, a huge idea, and then it just like goes on to the next one. Well, James is kind of like that. The style of writing in James is like Proverbs. He has this whole thing, about making plans and you don't know what is going to happen from one day to the other. And then he goes to this and he says, don't boast in your arrogant schemes. Now, the arrogant schemes could be the plans that we make. All such boasting is evil. And then he says, if anyone knows the good that they ought to do and doesn't do it, then it's sin for them. So it's kind of a little bit of a different concept. So I thought it was just kind of weird how he jumps around, but that's the style of writing. Go ahead.
And we weren't there, but this could tie into the other verses because he could be talking about a particular brother in the church or a group of friends, because just a few verses earlier, like, well, you say you're going to go to the city and make a bunch of money. So now he's saying you're boasting in your arrogant schemes to get rich, but you're not even concerned about helping anybody around you. So what good is making all this money? You're going to travel and become rich
Especially
when
when
you can't take care of your brother.
Right. Especially if it's for selfish gain and not thinking, like you said, about anybody else. Yeah.
And the Jewish culture is brought up to not only help their family, but also help those around them. So if they see someone in need, if they want to make these plans to go get money, well, you know what's right, and you're not doing it.
They're showing their responsibility.
Yeah, just like you said,
and it's the distractions of the plan that may veer us off to another so that we can help somebody else out.
It's like if a family member gets sick, your mom or grandmother or somebody gets sick in the family. Somebody usually in the family steps up, kind of drops what they got going and step up, or multiple people.
That's
great.
So it'd be like, sorry grandma, I know you're sick, but I got stuff to do. And if everybody just stays their own selfish course, then who's going to take care of grandma? So.
It's amazing how in our culture, I was in the hospital with my daughter a year and a half ago, and my father was yelling at me on the phone, "You need to be at work!" And I was like, we're from two different worlds. I mean, but you're exactly right. I mean, it's like the culture is not to do stuff like that.
Okay, so I'm gonna veer off here a little bit and I'm gonna go backwards. So how does this all fit in with being a mist? So the mist appears for a little while, maybe that's the key, and then vanishes. So how does that fit in with what else James is saying in this verse, or in these verses?
Well, compared to eternity, where life here is very, very small.
Yeah.
we really don't know when short time. So just like parable says in the New Testament, so alarmed, but then doesn't do anything with it. So you gotta look at what God does for us. Life's a van. There are things we make plans, but to make them to where they don't really look at what God's plan for your life is, like we said earlier. So you have to look at what is pure, righteous, the Philippians 4:8, and how is our plans relating to that? And if our plans aren't that, then that's all going to be godly plans, and it's going to be more righteous plans you can set out, because you have very limited time to get things done.
maybe James was like rebuking them. Like, who are you? You're just a mist that appears and comes and goes, and like you're making all these big plans, but you're just like. And I will tell you that James is not necessarily talking about the Christians or talking to the Christians, but in this first part, in different parts in James, he's talking to Hebrews who aren't necessarily, or Jews who are not necessarily saved. They're not necessarily Christians. So he could be addressing those people in their big plans, in that you don't know what's going to happen. You're not the all in all in this world. And because he then talks about the boasting. To boast in your arrogant schemes, and I think that's probably referring to that first part of the verse up there, is that you have all these big plans. I think the gist of it, of this like section, from what is it, 13 to 17, is that it's okay to make plans. It's okay to have ideas and goals and visions, but we got to leave room for the Lord to move and to breathe. And Corey, you phrased it so well. You know, and I think that's the thing. It's okay to make plans. It's okay to have visions. And it's okay to stick to them, but we have to allow God to speak to us and move and direct us if we need to go a different way. We have to be flexible. And we don't tend to be flexible.
He's cool.
Any other thoughts? All right, we're going to go to James 5. All right. Now listen, you rich people. Weep and wail because of the misery that's coming on you. Your wealth has rotted, and moths have eaten your clothes. Your gold and silver are corroded. Their corrosion will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire. You have hoarded wealth in the last days. That's not very nice. This is definitely directed to the Jewish people. I had to laugh when I read, your wealth has rotted and moths have eaten your clothes. So clothing was very symbolic of wealth in that day and age. If your clothes represented how much wealth you had. And if we look at how Hollywood has dressed the typical Jewish person, or the disciples back in the Bible days, they all look like they were moth-eaten and kind of raggedy. So whenever you saw somebody that had silvery garments and bright clothes, I'm going to hit my head on that thing. They automatically knew that they were of great wealth. And so James is saying, you know, it's not going to last forever. I thought it was funny because now you couldn't tell who was rich by their clothing and who wasn't. Because, you know, we pay $500 for a pair of jeans that are all raggedy and, you know, right, exactly. And so a wealthy person could walk right next to you and you wouldn't even know it because their clothing doesn't really show it. What does show it nowadays?
Jewelry, cars.
Okay.
Cars. Houses.
Yeah. Interesting how it changes. So who would have been the rich Hebrews that James is talking to? Who do you think they would have been?
The Pharisees.
That's what I was thinking too. Any other ideas?
Any of these Pharisees, Sadducees, any of the
people in the church, right? In the Jewish sect. Those high up officers. If we look, the next portion, we may go back. he addresses them and describes them a little bit more. Look, the wages you have failed to pay, you have paid, blah. The wages you failed to pay the workers who mowed your fields are crying out against you. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Almighty. So it could be the Pharisees, the Sadducees and such, but it also could be those who have profited from owning lands, farms, who have gotten wealthy in that area as well. So it could be those too. And this is who James is addressing, is not those Christians, because then he tells them to repent. Repent of your sins. So he says, the cries of the harvester have reached the ears of the Almighty. The cries. We hear this again, we hear this earlier in the Old Testament, where when they were in captivity, the Israelites were in captivity, and they cried to the Lord, and it'll say the Lord heard their cry. And I thought it was really interesting that it says the cries of the harvesters reach the ears of the Almighty. So those two cries are the same. And I studied this a little bit, and the cries, it came because they were defenseless, they needed protection. It's like a particular cry. And I'm curious, I know you're looking, aren't you? For the Hebrew or Greek meaning of that word cry. But I think Hebrew and Greek are so interesting because we have cry, and it can mean a numerous crying for joy, crying for sadness, crying for mourning. It could be all kinds of, but we just have one word. But in the Greek and the Hebrew, they take this word, they have different words for each thing. That's why it's so fascinating to know what that word means. Like you had looked up one too, but it's a specific cry. And it reaches the Lord because they're defenseless, they need protection, they have numerous enemies, and they have numerous powerful enemies, and they just can't get victory, they just can't overcome. Did you find anything interesting?
Well, the cry, it says it's a cry of joy, pain, etc. Just to raise a cry, and it was a very high, strong voice.
So that's talking more of like the sound of it.
Yeah, and to implore aid. In other words, he's in need of help now.
Have you ever had a cry like that? Have you ever experienced a cry like that where you just felt totally helpless, totally like you couldn't, and the only thing you could call to was God? And that's what this cry is. It is, I don't want to say it's joyful because it's not joyful, but it is because you have this Savior and this hope that He's going to hear you. And so that cry, it was that cry that reached the Lord's ears. Amazing. You have lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fattened yourselves in the day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered the innocent one who is not opposing you. It always fascinates me how the Jewish people, I've been reading in the Old Testament, how the Jewish people, the Israelites, in the Old Testament, the Israelites, how they just never fought back. And we see even in the modern times, I've read a lot of historical fiction on the persecution of the Jews in Europe, and it's just and these powerful saints, I guess they're saints, I don't know what you would call them, but they're just very faithful because they know that their God is going to deliver them. And it just amazes me the faith that they have and the strength that they have to just stand and wait for God's deliverance. And if you read in the Old Testament, the different stories that, you know, the prophet tells them what they need to do with this battle. And if they do what the prophet has told them to do, you can see the salvation of, that's that verse, stand and see the salvation of the Lord. You have to stand and see and know that God is going to deliver you. And it's,
Well, I looked up the cry in the different lexicon, and it says that it's calling for aid, and it's those imploring for vengeance. And so it just gave a little bit of a different kind of.
yeah. So James is getting down on these rich Hebrews for living in luxury, self-indulgences, fatten yourself. Is it bad to have pleasure and wealth? Is it bad to have good things and be wealthy?
No,
Is
but
that
going back, it's bad if you're enjoying those things, but you're not helping those right.
Corey? I think that's the gist of the of the chapter. It's true. It's true. So in all of that stuff, where does the sin come from? Where you just said it, actually.
Well,
When does the sin start? I mean, you can have wealth and you can have great things, but where sin start to enter in?
well, it's greed or the love of money.
Yeah.
It's not the money, but the love of money. Is when you love money, you're
Right.
gonna make plans to go to different cities and do things, or you're gonna
Yeah.
take profits over treating your people fairly.
Right. That's good.
Right.
Because he's talking to people that should know what they're doing, but they're putting their greed over taking
Yes.
care of their workers.
Yeah.
Fairly.
Because they've been brought up in the Israelites, the Jewish laws. They've been brought up in there, so they know what's right. They know they should pay their workers a fair wage. They know that, and they're not doing it. There's a verse in here. It might be the next one. Those that know sin, or
That was bad.
Yeah, we've got.
that was back there. Those that know to do good and they don't do it is sin.
And
Right.
then this is just a continuation of that same
Right.
part.
Yeah.
Because more than likely, James writes this letter would never go to a rich family or like that, just be the local people in the church. So he's just reminding them that, remember, no matter how you get blessed by God, don't let the love of money hit you. Because usually rich people, they didn't really do that. Even the Pharisees and Sadducees, they would never see this letter. But
I wondered that too. I thought about that too. I'm like, why would James write about people who's never going to see this letter? Why would he add all of them into this letter who would never see the letter or never read it or have it read to them? Just like, why would he include that in? But I think I'm wondering if it's perchance they would, or that the Christians would share with someone that. And then the next one, it kind of, I thought, well, maybe it's just giving hope to the Christians. Like, this is what these people are facing. They're this way and that way and this way. But be patient, brothers and sisters. So now he's talking to the Christians. Be patient, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, patiently waiting for the autumn and the rains. You too be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near. So it's almost like this is what they're going through, all of this, and this is what is going to befall them. But you stand firm, because this is going to be your reward. Yeah.
This message is very fitting for the times we live in. Very fitting. Yeah.
Do you want to explain?
Well, yeah, I mean, especially like the people in politics with everything going on. And he brought up a very good point that kind of had a light bulb go out is when a person loves money and they don't treat their, their nation correctly or their workers or whatever it may be. I mean, that's not good at all.
Right. I get little quips on my phone, short little news feeds, and it said, and I got it today, and I was thinking about this verse. It's a prime example of this verse, and it said something about, I don't know how true it is or anything like that, but it had pictures. It said, look at the pictures of Putin on his yacht while his countrymen are suffering. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's what James was talking about. The same thing. The workers are suffering, and they're living in luxury and being fattened up with all kinds of things, and you know.
I mean, like how the governor had her little party while she told us all to stay home.
Well, right, yeah. Those kind of things.
Like that.
But be patient, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. So we just need to stand firm and stand fast in what we believe in and what God has taught us and showed us in His Word to do. Be patient, stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near. Don't grumble against one another, brothers and sisters, or you will be judged. So I'm assuming he's probably talking about the Christians again, to the Christians again, or you will be judged. The judge is standing at the door. James talks about this a lot, doesn't he? During this whole book, I mean, doesn't he talk a lot about, our tongues and watching what we say and uplifting one another? So clearly it was an issue at that time.
Well, it still is an issue. I mean, it's the bickering back and forth over opinions and wants and needs and, and who's right and who's wrong and your need is not as good as my need and, I mean, it's not the focus.
And it like all comes to, our heart condition. All of this stuff it's all about our heart condition. And if we can stay faithful to Him and understand who He is and who He is in our life and trust Him, I think that's the hugest thing, is to be able to trust who He is and know that He's going to take care of those people who are unfair to us. But we just need to stand. We just need to stand and let Him do. I think it's the hardest thing for us.
Amen.
Is to stand and wait, and just wait. I have something I'm praying about. I'm like, Lord, I've been waiting a long time. You told me I got this, that you got this. So I'm like, I need to see something. And He's faithful to show us little things. If you've got something that you're just, God's going to do, God's got it, and you're getting discouraged, just like, okay, Lord, I need some encouragement. I need to see something. And He's been faithful to me and given me little things to just, okay, all right. Some of them are very little, but I hang on to them because I know.
That's like Joseph in the Bible. The Lord gave him a dream that he would be the king, and that his brothers would bow down to him. But he was thrown in prison, and at the time, he couldn't see what was going to happen. But a lot of times, that's what God does. He speaks those things that are not as though they were, and then we just have to walk it out. But that's the tough part, is walking it out. But He's our strength, obviously.
Yeah, the decades of horror in between the dream and the occurrence.
Yeah. And sometimes we don't want to walk, we want to run.
Yeah.
We want to make it happen
There's a
ourselves.
difference between the vision and the plan.
Yeah.
The vision, but God's plan took on.
Yeah, long ways away. We could talk about the Israelites wandering in the desert. God's vision was for them to have a promised land, but because of the choices they made, they had to go this way and that way and around this way and up that way and to get to the promised land.
Can I ask a question? I know it might not be in your notes, but verse 6, we skipped over it. It talks about them killing the innocent one that wasn't against him. Is that talking of Jesus? I mean, lots of times they'll capitalize stuff if it's signifying God or Jesus, but one is not capitalized here, but I still wonder if it was Jesus. But we don't really talk about that in the next verses, so I'm just curious if you had an opinion.
It would make sense if the Hebrews, the rich Hebrews that he's talking about, were the Sadducees and Pharisees, because they were the ones who put Jesus to death.
Because when you get to a certain wealth status, it's about making money, but it's about protecting your money. And so the leaders, the people that had the money, they go into protection mode or, hoarded in and
Right.
they wanna protect
Yeah.
themselves. So if setting up this guy who's causing trouble in the community, setting him up to be murdered is gonna protect their wealth, and they're gonna do what they gotta do to protect their wealth.
Right. Sure.
In this right here, it's talking about, the reason why it's called the innocent one is that when they try to take them to court because they're crying out, that they're so rich that their power causes them to fail in the courts, so that way they go to jail and then they die in jail, thus killing or murdering innocent people. Because they're innocent, they're just
They
like,
can't defend
yeah,
themselves.
they can't defend themselves.
Right.
Because there's no
That's
justice for the
terrible.
poor.
Yeah. Could be both ways though. I mean, they did, if the Pharisees,
Sorry to side.
No, perfectly all right. Any sidetracks are fine, as long as you guys figure out the answers, we're good.
Do you think that some of these, like tax collectors and people that make it to the top and forget about the poor, like question is like, I wonder if they were always like that, or they got hardened through money or through prosperity, they just kind of forgot about it,
Oh, I think, yeah. Because you see throughout, even as you read through the Old Testament, and even as you look into history, that the more money that people gain, the more power they have, and so then they just kind of forget about the little guy, or they don't even think about. I mean, we've seen the persecution, the slave owners, all through history. We've seen as people rise in wealth, it's just kind of like it's forgotten like where they've come from. We've heard stories after stories of people who have started out, in the streets or super poor, and they rose and they just kind of forgotten and lost that respect and honor of other human beings. I'm all this. It's just, I almost wonder if it's like this switch
that's
that gets turned on, and all
I
of a
think it's your
sudden.
environment and who you surround yourself with, right? I mean, because I know, like in my women's Bible study, we pray a lot for the leaders, right? Like, and that they get the right connections and people to further God's plan. I mean, so there are people that you pray that are in those kinds of positions that move on God's behalf, and that they do stay, in safe, and that they're around people, but those are people who move in circles where it is not godly.
Right.
And so it takes a strong heart, a strong character, a strong belief and resolve to walk that out.
Right.
Right,
Definitely. There's a verse, and I've thought of it many times, and I've said it many times, especially in these days. The wise will become foolish, and the people that we have put in power because of their wisdom, because of their being able to run things and being able to work things. We've put them in power, but all of a sudden now they're making like decisions that make no sense at all. Killing babies after they're born, as calling it an abortion. It's like, hello, they're born, they're a human being. Just things like that. And if you look at some of the controversial things, and people are making decisions and promoting things that in our minds we're thinking about, it's like, it makes no sense at all. But these were wise people. These were knowledgeable, intelligent people who, we put them in power, and something just, sin happened. People you hang around with, but I just like, the Bible says the wise will become foolish.
It's like a lot of those professional athletes nowadays, a lot of them came from the streets or didn't have a lot of money, and boom, they're making millions. And if you don't know how to handle that, or you didn't have at least a mom telling you, hey, keep your head about you, don't forget where you came from,
Yeah, absolutely. Where are we at? Be patient then, brothers and sisters, for the coming of the Lord. You know what I wondered, and we can just kind of discuss about this, maybe you guys know the answer. So I'm wondering, I guess it comes from, I just read this book about, it's going to sound like a joke, about two Jewish kids and a Catholic. They kind of grew up, and it followed the book as the book followed them as they grew up. But it just gave a lot of insight into the Jewish culture. They were Orthodox Jews, so Orthodox Jews are very stringent and very Orthodox. And there you go. So it gave a lot of insight into their traditions and their beliefs and stuff like that. And so when we talked about the second coming, I just kind of thought about this. So Jews, they don't believe in Jesus. Well, they believe Jesus was a teacher, right? So is the Lord's second coming going to be the first coming for them?
If they recognize him.
Well, it says, where did I read that? Did I read that in here? The second coming, he'll be coming on clouds. So it'll be more of a, well, who knows what clouds really are going to be. You know, it could be a donkey, but.
Well, his coming will be proclaimed with a shout and a trumpet, and his second coming is coming in a horse as a triumph over.
So possibly the second coming that we as Christians think of is more in line with what their second coming, or the first coming would be, because that was the whole thing. They expected somebody to come and take over and triumph over their enemies and all of that.
The zealots.
Yeah, just a thought. Oh, this is good. This is a good point I wanted to talk about. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valued crop, patiently waiting for the autumn and the spring rains. You too be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near. Okay, I'm going to skip over the grumbling part and go here. Brothers and sisters, an example of patience in the face of suffering. Take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. As you know, we count as blessed those who have persevered. You have heard of Job's perseverance and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy. So in this kind of section, he's talking about patience and perseverance. So what is the difference, and is there a difference between patience and perseverance? Do you want to put the other slide?
No, there is. I'm trying to figure out how to verbalize it.
Yeah. It almost seems like I'm recording these. But it seems like patience will develop perseverance. Because you notice I'm very patient, especially how we used to be. I was not patient at all. Very patient, and the more patience I have, it now takes that perseverance and goes further. Similar to like a runner will go and run and only get so far, but pretty soon his endurance is building and building and building because he is running, so then he gets endurance. So having patience, just some things like, okay, count of 5, and keep doing that, and then pretty soon now your perseverance is like, now you're doing it continually.
It's like patience is the action and perseverance is the character trait that gets developed.
Yeah, that's what it is, because you can't, where'd you get perseverance from? So it's like, he's got to have something previous. You persevere things. Okay, Corey's got it now.
Just my thoughts. Patience is like they're both mindsets, but patience is more passive where perseverance is more active. Because you can actually get lazy in your patience, because you could get to the place where you're just expecting God to do something and you stop doing stuff on your own. Perseverance is more active faith and active patience.
That's really good.
Lazy impatience. That's an interesting thought.
Do what?
Lazy impatience.
I know.
That's an
never
interesting
would've-
thought.
Yeah, that is. I have to go home and think about that, chew on that one this week. So he uses let's see where I'm at. The prophets. So he uses two examples, the prophets and he uses Job. So how do those work into patience and perseverance? So he uses the example of the prophets. Take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord, and then Job, and Job's perseverance. How does that? Go ahead.
I think kind of like what he was saying, I think they're, and him as well, I think they work together, they're intertwined. So I think almost like, I don't know if I go as far as to say this, but you can't have one without the other. So basically, yeah, so far that's all I was saying. I'm trying to think what else.
Okay. So the commentary says that Job had perseverance, but he didn't have patience.
Yeah. Well, look at how he yelled at God, and how he fought with God, and how he screamed with God.
I thought that was interesting. Because, like, so if we think about the patience working into perseverance, and I kind of think that, but I don't know. I couldn't say for sure if you could have one without the other. But you're right, he did yell at God, but he never.
Well, and if you think about it this way, the patience in the face of suffering, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. So in order to be a prophet back then, I mean, and for God to speak to you, that said something about who you were. And they were speaking to nations who were just corrupt and evil. And so, I mean, think of the patience that prophet had to have when, I mean, they could just see all the calamity, to be able to give them the word of the Lord so that there could be correction. I mean, how many times do we get frustrated with that brother or sister or family member that's just like, are you serious? Like, you're doing that again?
Yeah.
And to be patient enough to speak life into it.
Okay. The farmer has patience. Okay, use the example of the farmer. Look how the farmer is patient with his crops, waiting until the spring rains.
Well, if you compare the two, the prophets and the farmer, both, see, the farmer knows that if he
They're both
plants
sowing
and
seed.
waits, he'll have an increase.
Okay.
And he knows that, so he's patient. He goes, I know what I've done. I know what's to come. A prophet does the same thing. Here's God's word. I know what the outcome is. Here it is. If you follow, I know it will come. Just like the farmer will. But it's up to the people.
But the prophet doesn't know what the outcome is. I mean, he knows the outcome, but he doesn't know what the people are going to do.
Yeah.
But the farmer knows what the seed is going to do and what he's going to get. Job did not know what the outcome was going to be.
Right.
Oh, that's
Mm-hmm.
right.
He was given an option to curse God and die.
So do you think patience and perseverance, there's a difference in that one is knowing the outcome and one is not knowing the outcome? Maybe?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I think also perseverance is, attending to the fact that, look at all that Job went through. That was hell. That was living hell. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I would curse God too.
I agree with you.
You know what I mean? And I lost my whole family and was given awful disease and I had been faithful. So I think perseverance attends to the fact that, like, when you're living through hell on earth, it's the character that is being built.
Job knew his God.
Yeah.
There's no question. He knew his God and he trusted his God.
That's hard to do. I have another odd one.
Through all of that, yeah.
Another odd one. So maybe the perseverance is having a plan to be faithful. You don't have a vision. Because Job didn't have a vision of the end state.
Right.
He knew if he persevered doing what he was supposed to do, that the Lord would take care of it. Where the prophets and the farmer, they have a vision of the end state, so they can trust in that vision that they have, where Job didn't have a vision.
That's
Yeah. There's a hope. I knew hope came in here somehow. I kept getting the word hope when I was reading about this. Job had a hope of what was going to happen. The farmer has a hope in what's going to happen. Job had a hope in the sense that he knew his God was a deliverer, and he trusted his God to heal him and to take care of him. The
Did he?
farmer.
Did he?
Oh yes.
Or did it, but God spoke to him and said, are you the one who goes down to the deep? Do you forget who I am? Like God had to remind him
Right.
who he was before he could even get to that hope. He was ticked off.
He didn't doubt God though. He
He
knew,
didn't doubt,
he
but
knew who God
he
was.
definitely
I
questioned
don't
him.
think he doubted God. He knew who God was, and he stood with God. When everyone else was saying, just curse God and die, he's like, no, I can't, I'm not going to. So,
His faith was stronger.
yeah.
I mean, he did. He was frustrated. He said things he should have
Oh,
said.
right. And that's why he didn't have patience.
But he still persevered.
Yeah,
And so that's,
right.
I guess the big takeaway is, you can get frustrated and get off course a little bit, but you get back track, you get back on course and you persevere, even if you don't have a vision.
Right.
Even if you don't know how the Lord's gonna work it out, you got faith that he will.
And the prophets persevered.
Right.
They persevered even though they saw that it was hopeless. They still persevered because they had that hope in what God was going to do and what God wanted to do. So I heard this thing and it just gave me like this. The difference between hope in the Bible and hope in what we define in a worldly sense, what hope means, is hope. When the Bible talks about hope and Jesus being our hope, it's sure, it's definite, it's going to happen. Where the hope that the definition, maybe in Webster's or wherever, for in the English language is just like it may happen.
A wish.
It could a wish. That's the word I was looking for. A wish. It could happen. I hope I go to Disney World.
Yeah.
There's no definite that it's going to happen. It's a wish that I have. And so the difference between the hope that is in the Bible is that it's sure and definite, and the hope in the world is it's a wish. It may or may not happen. And so when we persevere, we know God is going to deliver. We know God is going to do what he said he's going to do. We have patience, we're just waiting. Good. This is good. We're not done yet either. Okay. You want to finish the chapter now?
I don't know, it's 12 after now.
Let's go after.
Let's
Let's
do
see.
a couple more.
Okay, let's do one more. Okay. Above all, my brothers and sisters, do not swear, not by heaven or by earth or by anything else. All you need to say is a simple yes or no. Otherwise, you will be condemned. Is anyone among you in trouble? Let them pray. Is anyone happy? Let them sing songs of praise. Is anyone among you sick? Let them call the elders of the church to pray for them, to pray over them, and anoint them with oil in the name of the Lord. What is he talking about swearing? Do not swear.
Making an oath.
Taking a note. Okay.
Yeah. Just one definition of that.
So I think of it as, when I read this, I think of it as
G3000.
yeah, that one. I swear on my mother's grave. Okay, like that kind of that blah 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 whatever. And that is kind of what I was thinking when I had read this. Because why does he say then, let your yes be yes and your no be no? How does swearing and
I swear by heaven
that,
or by earth. Like I swear to God that this will happen.
right, Right.
So, again, I think it's talking about character, like, you know, I mean, let your yes be yes and your no be no. I mean, I heard an interesting thing today where they said that, you know, a lot of your self-confidence, if you're not a self-confident person, it's because you end up lying to yourself a lot because your own yeses get, you know, you don't do the things you want to do. You don't do the things you know you should do. And that destroys confidence. And so, you know, when we're swearing by something, it's because our own yes doesn't have a lot of weight.
That's good. That's good. Yeah. Mike, this is your favorite thing that I hear you teach the kids all the time. Again,
It's,
let your yes be yes.
in other words, you gotta be truthful. In other words, you shouldn't have to say anything. Your yes should always be yes, your no should always be no. So it goes back to your character. And if you don't have the character to back it up, then you have to affirm by saying, my parents great or whatever. Because I really do believe this and I never, no, it doesn't matter.
Right.
It's your yes or your no. It's all about character and how you stand.
And if we're people of character, and if people know that when we say yes, we'll be there. If they know that, then we don't say, I promise you on my mother's grave I will be there, because your yes is enough. Your yes is enough. You don't have to say anymore because your character is such that they know. It's like, why do we say that? Why do we say stuff like that? It's because we're trying to convince them.
Right.
Or I also feel like it's permission to not be swayed by those around you. You know, like don't let the culture, don't let the world pressure you into a no or a yes when you know what the right decision is, you know? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, let your yes be yes and your no be no. I mean, how many times, I mean, maybe as a woman, like, do we say yes to things? It's like, I really want to say no. You know? Like,
Yeah. But that's where it gets us to the point where our yes isn't yes and our no isn't no. Because of the culture around us, and so we tend to vacillate back and forth, and so our yes is not yes anymore. It's like, well, maybe if I feel like it. But if we're people where our yes is yes and our no is no, then we don't even have to worry about swearing by heaven or by earth. So is anyone among you in trouble? Let them pray. Is anyone happy? Let them sing songs of praise. Is anyone among you sick? Let them call the elders of the church to pray for them and anoint them with oil in the name of the Lord. So again, here's this, you know, when you look at it at the beginning, it's like, how does this relate to the other verse? But I think it does, because if we're people of character, what are we going to do when somebody's sick? If we're godly people, if we're Christians, what are we going to do when somebody's sick or in trouble?
Help, pray for them.
We're going to pray for them. You know, I think it's funny because it's like opposites. You know, oh no, it's not opposites. Sorry. Here was the other thing I thought about when I looked at the oil. One of the commentaries said that the oil had healing properties in it, and then in the Old Testament there is it talks of the oil with healing powers. So I wonder if it's different oil. I know we've done studies way back, and it's the oil, you know, bring oil from the Holy Land, and you know all that has frankincense and all that stuff in it. But and then was it in here? It wasn't in here. It was in the Old Testament where they used oil and wine. Oh no, it was with the Good Samaritan. He poured oil and wine. Is that a thing for healing? Like, I never thought about them together, but I'm like, oh, to heal all those things.
Oils for healing, wines for sedative.
Do what?
Oils for healing, wines for sedative.
No, maybe. No, it said he poured oil and wine on it.
Yeah. One for sedative, one for healing.
Let's see.
But if you look at it, it's just, seems like he's bringing everything together. Because, I mean, you talked about before that if you know what's right, if you don't do what's right, that's a sin to you. Then he's showing you, well, is there anyone you're in trouble? Well, that's you. And I'm right, you know. Here's what we need to do. Let's go. Let's do these things. you know?
True. True. Is he talking to the Christians now? Well, he must be. He says brothers and sisters. So he's talking to the Christians now. And the prayer offered in faith will make the sick person well. It's kind of weird worded that way. The Lord will raise them up if they have sinned. Oh, well, this is going to be a long discussion. I think I should save this for next week. Pastor Calvin.
Yeah, here come the hard ones.
So think about this. Okay, if they have sinned, they will be forgiven. Therefore, confess your sins one to another and pray for each other so that you may be healed. So I'm just going to leave it right there. And because I've read a few things about this over the last couple weeks, and I'm just going to let Pastor Calvin handle that one. I'll let you guys meditate and think about that.
Couple questions.
Yeah, for the week. And then you can come back with ammunition.